At my grandson's wedding, he stood up with the microphone and said, "I need to tell everyone who really raised me." I held my breath, expecting him to thank his mother. Instead, he looked at me and said, "Everything I am today, I owe to my grandma." I cried tears I had been holding back for 25 years. My name is Dorothy Williams, and everyone calls me Grandma. I'm 68 years old, and I raised my grandson Marcus from 3 months old until he became the successful man at that altar. But for 25 years, his mother Keisha took all the credit. Marcus was born when Keisha was 17. She thought having a baby would be fun, like playing with a doll. It took 3 months for her to realize babies cry at night, need constant attention, and cost money. "Mama, can you watch Marcus tonight? I need to go out. Mama, I can't afford formula. Can you help, Mama? He won't stop crying. What am I doing wrong?" Occasional babysitting became full-time caregiving when Keisha decided motherhood was too hard. She moved back with her boyfriend and left Marcus with me temporarily. 25 years later, temporary became permanent. I raised that boy from diapers to diploma. I got up with him when sick, helped with homework, attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every basketball game. I worked double shifts to pay for his clothes, school supplies, and college tuition. Keisha would show up occasionally when she needed money or when something fun made her look like a good mother. High school graduation, Keisha was front row, taking credit for raising such a wonderful son. College acceptance, Keisha posted on Facebook about how proud she was of her boy. Every achievement Marcus earned through my sacrifice, Keisha claimed as proof of her excellent parenting. But I never said anything. I didn't want Marcus in the middle of family conflict. Until his wedding day, when Marcus finally told the truth. "My grandmother worked 2 jobs to put me through school," he said into that microphone. "She never missed a game, never missed a chance to tell me I could be anything. When I was scared, she held me. When I needed guidance, she was there with wisdom and love." Keisha Williams gave birth to me, but Dorothy Williams raised me. The reception fell silent. 200 guests turned to look at me, sitting where Keisha had insisted I belong, in the back. For the first time in 25 years, everyone knew the truth about who really raised Marcus Williams. Let me tell you how it really started, because the truth is more complicated than just a teenage mother who couldn't handle responsibility. When Keisha got pregnant at 17, I was devastated. Not because I was ashamed of her, but because I knew she wasn't ready to be a mother. Keisha had always been my wild child. While her older sister Denise was studying and following rules, Keisha was sneaking out, skipping school, and running with the wrong crowd. When she told me she was pregnant, her exact words were, "Don't worry, Mama. Having a baby will make me grow up. I'll be a good mother." I wanted to believe her. Every mother wants to believe their child can rise to the occasion when it matters. For the first 3 months Keisha tried. She really did. She painted the nursery pink and blue because she didn't know the baby's gender. She bought tiny clothes and stuffed animals with money she borrowed from me. She read parenting books and talked about how much she loved her unborn baby. But when Marcus arrived 2 weeks early, reality hit Keisha like a freight train. The first night home from the hospital, Marcus cried for 4 hours straight. Keisha tried everything: feeding, changing, rocking, singing. Nothing worked. At 3 a.m., she knocked on my bedroom door, holding a screaming baby and crying herself. "Mama, I can't do this. I don't know what he wants." I took Marcus from her arms and walked him around the house, humming the same lullabies I'd sung to her when she was a baby. Within 10 minutes, he was asleep. "How did you do that?" Keisha asked in amazement. "Experience, baby girl. It takes time to learn what they need." But Keisha didn't want to take the time to learn. The next night, when Marcus started crying at 2 a.m., Keisha put a pillow over her head and pretended not to hear him. I got up and took care of my grandson. The night after that, Keisha didn't even pretend. She just looked at me expectantly when Marcus cried, as if it was my job to handle nighttime duties. Within 2 weeks, I was doing all the 2 a.m. feedings, all the diaper changes, all the rocking and soothing. "Keisha," I said one morning after a particularly rough night, You need to take more responsibility for your son. I am taking responsibility. I'm breastfeeding him. Only when I bring him to you. And only because I wake you up first. Mama, I'm exhausted. Being a new mother is hard. It's hard because you're letting me do all the work while you sleep through the night. I didn't ask you to get up with him. Then who's supposed to do it? Marcus is 3 weeks old. He can't take care of himself. I'll do better, Mama, I promise. But Keisha's promises were always empty. By the time Marcus was 2 months old, I was essentially a single mother all over again at 53 years old. I was working as a nurse at Metropolitan Hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts to support my own household. Coming home to take care of an infant was exhausting. But Marcus needed me. Keisha, meanwhile, was already talking about getting back to her normal life. Mama, my friends are going to a party this weekend. Can you watch Marcus, Keisha? You're his mother. You can't just leave him every time you want to socialize. It's just one party. I've been stuck in this house for 2 months. You've been stuck in this house. You're his mother. Taking care of him is your job, not a punishment. Other people help with their grandchildren. Other grandmothers help occasionally. I'm raising your son full-time. That's not true. But it was true, and we both knew it. The breaking point came when Marcus was 3 months old and got his first ear infection. He was screaming in pain at 2 a.m., running a fever of 102 degrees. I woke Keisha up to tell her we needed to take him to the emergency room. Right now? She asked groggily. Yes, right now. He's burning up and won't stop crying. Can't you just give him some Tylenol and see if he feels better in the morning? I stared at my daughter in disbelief. Her 3-month-old son was seriously ill, and she was more concerned about losing sleep than getting him medical attention. Keisha, get dressed. We're taking Marcus to the hospital. Why do I need to come? You know more about medical stuff than I do. That was the moment I realized Keisha wasn't just overwhelmed or inexperienced. She fundamentally didn't understand what it meant to be a mother. I drove Marcus to the hospital alone at 3 a.m., while his mother slept peacefully in her bed. The emergency room doctor confirmed it was a severe ear infection that required immediate treatment. Is the baby's mother here? The doctor asked. No, she had to work early in the morning. I'm his grandmother. Are you his legal guardian? That question stopped me cold. I wasn't Marcus's legal guardian. I was just his grandmother who happened to be taking care of him because his mother wouldn't. Not legally, but I'm the one who takes care of him. The doctor gave me a look that said he'd seen this situation many times before. Ma'am, you might want to consider making that arrangement official. This baby is going to need follow-up care, and someone needs to have legal authority to make medical decisions. When I got home at 6 a.m. with Marcus and his prescription antibiotics, Keisha was awake and getting ready for her part-time job at the mall. How is he? She asked casually, as if she was asking about the weather. He has a severe ear infection. He needs antibiotics every 6 hours for 10 days. Okay, you can handle that, right? I have to work today. Keisha, your son was in the emergency room all night with a serious illness. Don't you want to stay home and take care of him? Mama, you know more about medical stuff. He'll be better off with you. He'd be better off with his mother, who loves him enough to lose sleep when he's sick. I do love him, but you're better at the medical stuff, and I need the money from work. That conversation revealed everything I needed to know about Keisha's priorities. Her part-time job at the mall paid minimum wage. The money she earned in one day wouldn't even cover Marcus's prescription medication, but she'd rather make $40 selling shoes than stay home with her sick son. Over the next 3 months, the pattern became clear and permanent. I handled all nighttime care, all medical issues, all feeding schedules, all developmental needs. Keisha handled showing up when she felt like it, and taking credit whenever anyone complimented Marcus. When Marcus smiled for the first time, I was holding him during his 6 a.m. feeding. When he rolled over, I was playing with him on my living room floor. When he said his first word, Mama, he was looking at me, not Keisha. But whenever relatives visited or friends came by, Keisha would hold Marcus and talk about her baby and how proud she was of his development. He's such a good baby, she'd say. I'm so blessed to have such a perfect son. People would compliment her on what a wonderful mother she was, and Keisha would beam with pride. Meanwhile, I was the one who knew that Marcus was starting to teeth, that he preferred his bottle warm but not hot, that he slept better with a nightlight, and that he had a rash developing behind his left ear. By the time Marcus was 6 months old, I made a decision that changed all our lives. I petitioned the court for legal guardianship. Keisha was furious when she received the papers. "Mama, how could you do this to me? I'm his mother. You're his mother in name only. I'm the one raising him. I take care of him too." "When, Keisha? When do you take care of him?" "I help when I can. You help when it's convenient and fun. But parenting isn't just the fun parts. I can't believe you're trying to take my son away from me." "I'm not taking him away. I'm making official what's already true, that I'm his primary caregiver. What if I fight this? What if I prove I can take care of him myself?" I looked at my daughter with a mixture of love and sadness. "Keisha, if you can prove you're ready to be Marcus's full-time mother, I'll drop the guardianship petition. But that means no more going out with friends. No more sleeping through the night while someone else handles his needs. No more showing up only when you feel like it. That's not fair. Other mothers get help from their families. Other mothers don't abandon their children and then expect their own mothers to raise them." Keisha didn't fight the guardianship petition. Deep down, she knew she wasn't ready to be a mother. But she also wasn't ready to admit that publicly. So we reached an unspoken agreement that would define our family for the next 24 years. I would raise Marcus and handle all the actual work of parenting. Keisha would maintain the public fiction that she was his mother and take credit for his achievements. And Marcus would grow up thinking his mother was just a young woman who needed extra help, not someone who had essentially abandoned him. It was an arrangement that worked for everyone except me. But I told myself that Marcus's happiness was more important than my recognition. I was wrong about that. Because over the years, watching Keisha take credit for my sacrifices became more painful than I ever imagined it could be. The hardest part wasn't the sleepless nights or the financial strain of raising a child at 53 years old. The hardest part was watching Marcus grow up, thinking his mother was someone she wasn't. When Marcus started talking, Keisha taught him to call her mommy and me grandma, which was technically correct, but it didn't reflect the reality of our relationships. When Marcus had nightmares, he ran to my room, not hers. When he scraped his knee, he cried for grandma, not mommy. When he had important questions about life, school, or growing up, he came to me. But in public, Keisha maintained the illusion that she was his primary parent. At parent-teacher conferences, she would show up and introduce herself as Marcus's mother, while I sat quietly beside her. When teachers complimented Marcus's behavior or academic performance, they directed their praise to Keisha. "You're doing such a wonderful job with him," they'd say. "He's clearly being raised with strong values and lots of support." "Thank you," Keisha would reply, as if she'd had anything to do with Marcus's character development. I wanted to scream. I'm the one who reads to him every night. I'm the one who helps him with homework. I'm the one who taught him to say please and thank you. But I stayed quiet because I didn't want to embarrass Marcus or create family drama in public. The financial burden was overwhelming, but I managed it because I had to. My nurse's salary was comfortable for one person, but supporting a growing child meant sacrifices I hadn't planned for. I gave up my small luxuries, eating out, new clothes, weekend trips with friends, to pay for Marcus's needs. When he outgrew his clothes every few months, I shopped at discount stores and secondhand shops. When he needed school supplies, sports equipment, or field trip money, I worked overtime to cover the costs. When he wanted to play Little League Baseball, I paid the registration fees and bought his uniform, glove, and cleats. Keisha contributed occasionally, maybe $50 here and there, when she felt guilty, or when Marcus directly asked her for something. But the bulk of Marcus's expenses came from my paycheck and my savings. When Marcus was 8 and wanted to take piano lessons, the cost was $60 per month, plus the expense of renting a piano. "Mama, can I learn piano?" he asked me one evening after hearing a song on the radio. That's expensive, baby. Let me see what I can do. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital for 2 months to cover the piano lessons and rental fees. Meanwhile, Keisha posted on social media about how excited she was that her son was learning piano and how important music education was for children. When Marcus performed in his first recital 6 months later, Keisha sat in the front row, recording video and crying tears of pride. "My baby is so talented," she announced to anyone who would listen. "I knew he had musical ability." She posted the recital video on Facebook with the caption, "So proud of my musical prodigy. All those piano lessons are paying off. #proudmommy, #talented son." Dozens of people commented about what a dedicated mother she was, and how lucky Marcus was to have someone who invested in his talents. Nobody knew that I had worked 60-hour weeks to pay for those piano lessons. Nobody knew that I drove Marcus to his weekly lessons every Tuesday at 4 p.m., even when I was exhausted from working the night shift. Nobody knew that I sat through every lesson, learning alongside Marcus so I could help him practice at home. Keisha knew, but she never corrected people's assumptions about her role in Marcus's musical education. This pattern repeated itself throughout Marcus's childhood. When he joined the basketball team in middle school, I bought his shoes, paid his travel expenses, and attended every game. Keisha showed up for the championship game and took selfies with Marcus in his uniform. When he made honor roll in high school, I was the one who had spent years helping him with homework and hiring tutors when he struggled. Keisha posted his report card on Instagram with hashtags about being a #proud mom. When he got accepted to college with a partial academic scholarship, I was the one who had saved money for years to cover what the scholarship didn't pay. Keisha threw a celebration party and gave a speech about how hard she'd worked to give Marcus opportunities. By the time Marcus graduated from college with a degree in engineering, I had spent over $200,000 of my own money on his upbringing and education. Keisha had contributed maybe $5,000 total over 18 years. But she was the one who got congratulated for raising such a successful young man. The emotional toll was even heavier than the financial cost. Every Mother's Day, Marcus would make or buy gifts for Keisha, while I got a card that said "to the best grandmother." Every time someone praised Marcus's character or achievements, they directed their compliments to Keisha. Every family gathering, every school event, every milestone celebration, I was acknowledged as the helpful grandmother, not the woman who had actually raised him. I loved Marcus enough to accept this arrangement for his sake. But inside, it broke my heart a little more each year. I began to wonder if Marcus truly understood who had sacrificed everything to give him the life he was living. I wondered if he knew that I had given up my own dreams, my own comfort, and my own financial security to ensure he had opportunities. I wondered if he appreciated that I had worked myself to exhaustion for 24 years so he could have everything he needed. Most painfully, I wondered if he would ever publicly acknowledge the truth about who had raised him. That uncertainty followed me for years, right up until his wedding day. The day when everything finally changed. The pain of being invisible became unbearable during Marcus's senior year of high school, when Keisha decided to take full credit for his college acceptance. Marcus had been accepted to Georgia Tech with a partial academic scholarship. It was the culmination of years of hard work, tutoring sessions I'd paid for, and countless nights I'd spent helping him with homework. But when the acceptance letter arrived, Keisha was the first person Marcus called. I was at work, pulling a double shift to pay for his senior year expenses, when my phone rang. "Grandma. I got in. I got into Georgia Tech." My heart swelled with pride. "Baby, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." I called Mom first, but her phone went to voicemail. "Can you believe it? Georgia Tech." "I can believe it because I know how hard you've worked. You deserve this, Marcus." "I can't wait to tell everyone. This is the best day of my life." When I got home that evening, I expected to find Marcus excited and eager to celebrate. Instead, I found him sitting quietly in the living room, while Keisha paced around making phone calls. "Denise, did you see Marcus's acceptance letter?" "Yes, Georgia Tech. I'm so proud of how I raised that boy." All those years of pushing him academically are finally paying off. I stood in the doorway, listening to my daughter take credit for achievements that represented my sacrifices, not hers. "Marcus," I said softly, "congratulations on your acceptance. This is incredible news." "Thanks, Grandma. I'm still in shock. You should be proud. All that hard work paid off." Keisha ended her phone call and turned to me with a bright smile. "Mama, isn't this amazing? My baby got into one of the best engineering schools in the country. It is amazing. Marcus has worked incredibly hard for this. We both have been pushing him academically since he was little." I bit my tongue to keep from responding. Keisha had never helped Marcus with homework, never attended a parent-teacher conference without me prompting her, never even knew what classes he was taking most semesters. "Well," I said carefully, "we should celebrate this achievement. I'm already planning a party. I want everyone to know what Marcus accomplished." The party was held the following weekend at Keisha's boyfriend's house. She had invited dozens of people, family, friends, co-workers, neighbors. When I arrived, I found Keisha holding court in the living room, telling everyone about her son's acceptance to Georgia Tech. "I always knew Marcus was special," she was saying to a group of relatives. "Even when he was little, I could tell he had the intelligence to go far." "You must be so proud," Aunt Beverly replied. "It's clear you raised him right." "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I've always prioritized his education." I walked over to Marcus, who was standing near the food table, looking uncomfortable. "How are you feeling about all this, baby?" "Good. Grateful. A little overwhelmed by all the attention." "You deserve the attention. This is your achievement." "Yeah, but listening to Mom talk, you'd think she was the one who got accepted to college." It was the first time Marcus had ever acknowledged the disconnect between Keisha's public narrative and our private reality. "Your mother is proud of you." "We all are, I know. But, Grandma, you're the one who helped me with calculus every night junior year. You're the one who paid for the SAT prep course. You're the one who drove me to college visits. That's what family does for each other. But Mom is getting all the credit." Before I could respond, Keisha appeared beside us. "Marcus, come over here. I want you to meet some of my friends from work." She led Marcus away to another group of people, eager to congratulate the proud mother of the college-bound student. I watched from across the room as Keisha basked in praise for my sacrifices. "Keisha, you should write a parenting book," one woman joked, "raising a son who gets into Georgia Tech. You clearly know what you're doing." "It's all about consistency and high expectations," Keisha replied. "I never let Marcus settle for mediocrity. I wanted to scream." Keisha had never set any expectations for Marcus beyond "don't get in trouble." I was the one who had pushed him academically, hired tutors when he struggled, and convinced him he was smart enough for engineering school. The worst moment came when Keisha's boyfriend asked her to give a toast. "I want to say a few words about my amazing son," Keisha announced, raising her glass. The room fell quiet as everyone turned their attention to her. 25 years ago, I was blessed with the most wonderful baby boy. From day one, I knew Marcus was destined for greatness. I felt sick listening to this rewriting of history. It hasn't always been easy, being a single mother and working to provide for him. But every sacrifice was worth it to see him achieve his dreams. Single mother, Keisha hadn't been a single mother. She'd been an absent mother who let me raise her son. I want to thank everyone who helped support Marcus along the way, especially my mother, who provided babysitting and extra help when needed. Babysitting, 24 years of full-time parenting, reduced to babysitting and extra help. But most of all, I want Marcus to know how proud I am of the young man he's become. Your acceptance to Georgia Tech is proof that hard work and good parenting pay off. The room erupted in applause and congratulations for Keisha's excellent parenting. Marcus looked around the room, and for a moment, his eyes met mine. I saw confusion and discomfort in his expression, as if he was hearing the same disconnect I was hearing. But he didn't say anything. After the party, I drove home feeling more invisible than I'd ever felt in my life. I had worked 2 jobs for 18 years to give Marcus opportunities. I had sacrificed my own comfort, my own dreams, my own financial security to ensure he could attend college. I had been his constant support system, his homework helper, his cheerleader, and his guide. But in the eyes of everyone who mattered, Keisha was the dedicated mother who had raised a successful son. The pattern continued throughout Marcus's college years. When he made Dean's List his freshman year, Keisha posted the notification on social media with the caption, "So proud of my son. All that good parenting is paying off in college. #proudmom, #smartson, #good parenting." When he landed a prestigious internship his junior year, Keisha called all our relatives to brag about her boy and how well she'd prepared him for the professional world. When he graduated summa cum laude with a degree in mechanical engineering, Keisha threw another party and gave another speech about her excellent mothering. Meanwhile, I was the one who had taken out loans to cover what his scholarship didn't pay. I was the one who sent him care packages during finals week. I was the one who drove 4 hours each way to attend his college graduation. But Keisha was the one who got congratulated for raising such an accomplished young man. The final insult came when Marcus got engaged to his college girlfriend, Sarah. Sarah was a lovely young woman from a close-knit family who clearly adored Marcus. When they started talking about wedding plans, Sarah naturally assumed that Keisha had been Marcus's primary parent. "Mrs. Williams," Sarah said to Keisha during their engagement party, "you must share your parenting secrets with me. Marcus is such a wonderful man. You obviously did an amazing job raising him. Thank you, honey. It wasn't easy, but I always tried to give Marcus everything he needed. He talks about you all the time. He says his mother taught him everything he knows about being a good person." I was standing close enough to hear this conversation, and it felt like a knife to my heart. Marcus talked about Keisha as the mother who had taught him everything. What about the thousands of conversations we'd had about values, character, and integrity? What about the times I'd helped him work through problems, make difficult decisions, and understand right from wrong? What about the moral foundation I'd built for him over 24 years? Marcus is lucky to have such a dedicated mother, Sarah continued. My mom always says you can tell good parenting by how the children turn out as adults. That's so sweet of her to say. I've always believed that children are a reflection of their upbringing. I walked away from that conversation feeling completely erased from Marcus's life story. According to Sarah, according to our relatives, according to everyone who had watched Marcus grow up, Keisha was the dedicated mother who had shaped him into the man he'd become. I was just the helpful grandmother who had provided babysitting and extra help. That night, I went home and cried for the first time in years. I cried for all the recognition I'd never received. I cried for all the credit that had been given to someone else. I cried for 24 years of invisibility. I cried because the most important relationship of my life, raising Marcus, had been reduced to a supporting role in someone else's success story. But mostly, I cried because I was afraid Marcus truly believed that Keisha had been his primary parent. I was afraid that all my sacrifices, all my love, all my dedication had been forgotten or minimized in his memory. I was afraid that when people asked him who raised him, he would answer my mother without thinking about the woman who had actually done the raising. 3 months later, Marcus asked me to help him write his wedding vows. "I want to thank the people who made me who I am," he said. "But I'm not sure how to word it. What do you want to say?" "I want to thank my mother for everything she did for me." My heart sank. After everything we'd been through together, Marcus was going to use his wedding to publicly thank Keisha for raising him. "That sounds lovely," I managed to say. "And I want to thank you too, Grandma, for all the extra help over the years. Extra help. Just like Keisha always said. You don't need to thank me, baby." I was happy to help, but inside, I was dying. The boy I had raised, the man I had shaped, the child I had sacrificed everything for, saw me as someone who had provided extra help to his real mother. I realized that no matter how much I had given, no matter how much I had sacrificed, no matter how much I had loved him, I would never be recognized as the person who had actually raised Marcus. In his mind, and in everyone else's mind, I would always be the supporting player in Keisha's story. I accepted that painful truth and resigned myself to sitting quietly in the back row at his wedding, watching his mother take a bow for my life's work. I had no idea that Marcus was planning the surprise that would change everything. The wedding planning process was torture for me, because it highlighted just how invisible I had become in Marcus's adult life. When Marcus and Sarah were choosing their wedding party, Sarah naturally asked Keisha to be the mother of the groom in all the official photos and ceremonies. "Mrs. Williams, I hope you'll do a reading during the ceremony," Sarah said to me. "Marcus speaks so highly of how important you are to the family." A reading. While Keisha got to walk Marcus down the aisle, light the unity candle, and be honored as his mother. "That would be lovely," I replied, because what else could I say? The wedding invitations listed Keisha Williams, mother of the groom, in elegant script. I wasn't mentioned anywhere on the invitation, despite having paid for Marcus's entire upbringing. When the church secretary called to confirm details about the ceremony, she asked to speak with Marcus's mother about seating arrangements and family photos. She meant Keisha, of course. "The mother of the groom will sit in the front row on the right side," the secretary explained to Keisha. "Other family members will be seated behind her, according to their relationship to the groom. I would be sitting in the third row, behind Keisha's boyfriend and her sister, the woman who had changed Marcus's diapers, taught him to walk, helped him with homework for 12 years, and paid for his college education, would be sitting behind people who saw him 3 times a year." The rehearsal dinner was even more painful. Sarah's parents, who were hosting the event, asked Keisha to give a speech as Marcus's mother. "We'd love to hear from the woman who raised such a wonderful young man," Sarah's father said. Keisha's speech was full of stories I remembered differently. When Marcus was little, he was such a curious child. I remember spending hours answering his questions about everything. I remembered being the one who answered Marcus's endless questions while Keisha watched TV or talked on the phone. I always encouraged his love of learning. Even when money was tight, I made sure he had books and educational toys. I remembered buying Marcus's books and educational toys with money from my nurse's salary, while Keisha spent her paycheck on clothes and nights out. When he struggled with math in middle school, I worked with him every night until he understood the concepts. I remembered hiring a math tutor with my overtime pay and sitting through every tutoring session so I could help Marcus at home. I'm so proud of the man Marcus has become. Every choice I made as his mother was focused on giving him the foundation he needed to succeed. The room applauded Keisha's speech, and several people wiped away tears. "What a beautiful tribute to motherhood," Sarah's mother said. "Marcus is so lucky to have had such a dedicated parent." I sat at my assigned table in the back, clapping politely while my heart broke. After Keisha's speech, Sarah's father asked if anyone else wanted to say something about Marcus. I waited for Marcus to invite me to speak, to give me a chance to share my own memories of raising him. But Marcus just smiled and said, "I think Mom covered everything perfectly." Mom covered everything. Without mentioning that I had been his primary caregiver for 24 years. That night, I went back to my hotel room and seriously considered not attending the wedding. What was the point of sitting in the back row, watching everyone celebrate Keisha for work I had done? What was the point of pretending to be the supportive grandmother when I had actually been his mother in every way that mattered? What was the point of participating in a ceremony that would officially erase my role in Marcus's life? But I couldn't miss Marcus's wedding, no matter how much it hurt. I had been there for every important moment of his life. I wasn't going to miss the most important one. The morning of the wedding, I got dressed in the navy blue dress I had bought for the occasion, not too fancy, because I didn't want to upstage Keisha, but nice enough to honor the importance of the day. I arrived at the church early and took my assigned seat in the third row. Keisha arrived 20 minutes later, wearing an expensive gold dress and carrying herself like the mother of the groom. She was immediately surrounded by relatives and friends who wanted to congratulate her on Marcus's success and tell her what a wonderful job she'd done raising him. "Keisha, you must be so emotional today," Aunt Beverly gushed, "watching your baby boy get married." "I'm trying not to cry," Keisha replied. It's hard to believe my little boy is all grown up. Her little boy. The child I had raised from infancy. You should be so proud, another relative said. Marcus turned out perfectly. You clearly knew what you were doing as a mother. Thank you. It wasn't always easy, but seeing him today makes every sacrifice worth it. Every sacrifice. What sacrifices had Keisha made? She had lived her life exactly as she wanted while I raised her son. As the ceremony began, I watched Marcus walk down the aisle, looking handsome and confident in his black tuxedo. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes, helping him with his first school project, cheering at his basketball games, and staying up all night when he had the flu. I remembered every milestone, every triumph, every moment of growth that had led to this day. But according to everyone in that church, I had been a minor character in Marcus's story. During the vows, Marcus thanked his mother for making him the man he was today. During the ring exchange, he winked at Keisha in the front row. During the unity candle ceremony, Keisha and Sarah's mother lit the candles together, representing the joining of their families. I sat in the third row, invisible and forgotten. The ceremony was beautiful, and Marcus and Sarah looked radiantly happy. But I felt like I was watching someone else's child get married, not the boy I had raised with my own hands. After the ceremony, during the receiving line, people congratulated Keisha over and over. What a beautiful ceremony. You must be so proud of Marcus. He's such a wonderful young man. You did an amazing job raising him. The mother of the groom looked so elegant. You can tell how much you mean to Marcus. When it was my turn to congratulate the couple, Marcus hugged me warmly. Thank you for being here, Grandma. This day wouldn't be complete without you. I wouldn't miss it for the world, baby. You look beautiful. Thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. Everything I'd done. As if my 24 years of parenting were just everything in a general sense. As we moved toward the reception hall, I prepared myself for more of the same. More speeches about Keisha's excellent mothering. More congratulations for her success in raising Marcus. More invisibility for me. I had no idea that Marcus had been planning something that would change everything. Something that would finally, after 25 years, give me the recognition I had been silently craving. The recognition that would make me cry tears of joy instead of tears of pain. The reception started exactly as I expected, with everyone focused on celebrating Keisha as the proud mother of the groom. The venue was beautiful, decorated in gold and ivory, with flowers everywhere. Marcus and Sarah had spared no expense, and I felt proud knowing that my years of working extra shifts had helped make his dreams possible. Even if no one else knew it, I was seated at table 8, toward the back of the reception hall. Keisha sat at the head table with the wedding party, glowing in her gold dress, as people stopped by to congratulate her throughout the evening. During the cocktail hour, I watched person after person approach Keisha, to share their admiration for her parenting. Keisha, Marcus is such a gentleman. You raised him right. What's your secret? I hope my son turns out as well as Marcus. You must be bursting with pride today. All those years of hard work paid off. Each compliment felt like a small knife to my heart. I sipped my champagne and tried to focus on Marcus's happiness instead of my own pain. Sarah's maid of honor came over to my table during the cocktail hour. You must be Marcus's grandmother. He talks about you all the time. That's sweet of him to say. He mentioned you helped out a lot when he was growing up. That's so wonderful that his mother had such supportive family. Helped out a lot. There it was again, the narrative that I had been a helpful supporting player in Keisha's parenting story. Marcus is a special young man, I replied diplomatically. He really is. Mrs. Williams did such an amazing job with him. Sarah always says you can tell everything about a person by how their mother raised them. I nodded and smiled, because what else could I do? As dinner was served, I found myself sitting with some of Keisha's extended family members, who hadn't seen Marcus grow up day by day. Dorothy, you must be so proud of Keisha, said her cousin Janet. Look how well Marcus turned out. She was such a young mother, but she really stepped up. Keisha loves Marcus very much, I said carefully. It shows. Single mothers don't always get the credit they deserve, But look at this success story. A son with a college degree and a good job, marrying a lovely girl from a nice family. Keisha should write a book about parenting. I pushed food around on my plate, trying not to respond to the irony of Keisha being praised as a successful single mother when I was the perfect one who had actually been the single mother raising her child. Marcus seems very close to his mother, Janet continued. You can see how much he respects her. That's the mark of good parenting right there. Marcus is respectful to everyone. I managed to say true, but there's something special about a mother-son bond. Keisha must have done something right to raise such a good man. As dinner wound down, the DJ announced it was time for the traditional speeches and toasts. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now hear from the father of the bride, followed by the best man, and then the mother of the groom. My stomach dropped. Keisha was going to give another speech taking credit for raising Marcus. In front of 200 wedding guests, Sarah's father spoke beautifully about welcoming Marcus into their family, and how obvious it was that he'd been raised with strong values. The best man told funny stories about Marcus in college, mentioning what a good guy he was and how his upbringing really showed in the way he treated people. Then it was Keisha's turn. She stood up gracefully, looking radiant in the spotlight, and took the microphone. Thank you all for being here to celebrate Marcus and Sarah's special day. As Marcus's mother, this is one of the most emotional moments of my life. As Marcus's mother, the phrase that had defined my invisibility for 25 years. 25 years ago, I was blessed with the most beautiful baby boy. From the moment I held him, I knew he was destined for greatness. I closed my eyes, trying to block out another rewriting of history. Being a single mother wasn't easy, but every sacrifice was worth it to see Marcus become the man he is today. Single mother, there it was again. The narrative that erased my existence completely. I worked hard to give Marcus every opportunity, to teach him right from wrong, and to show him what unconditional love looks like. The applause was enthusiastic. People were moved by Keisha's story of dedicated single motherhood. Marcus, I want you to know how proud I am of you, your success in school, your career, your choice of a wonderful wife. All of it reflects the values I tried to instill in you. Values she tried to instill. When had Keisha ever had a serious conversation with Marcus about values? Sarah, welcome to our family. You're getting a man who was raised to respect women, work hard, and always do the right thing. More applause. Several people were wiping away tears. And to all the parents here tonight, remember that our children are watching us every day. The love we give them, the examples we set, the sacrifices we make, it all matters. Marcus is living proof that good parenting pays off. The room erupted in applause and a standing ovation for Keisha's beautiful tribute to motherhood. I clapped politely from my back table, feeling more invisible than ever. As Keisha returned to her seat, basking in the praise and admiration of the wedding guests, I prepared myself for the rest of the evening. The mother-son dance would be next, where Marcus would dance with Keisha, while everyone watched and commented on their special bond. Then more congratulations, more praise for Keisha's parenting, more erasure of my role in Marcus's life. I was mentally preparing to excuse myself early when the DJ made an unexpected announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, the groom has asked for the microphone. Marcus Williams would like to say a few words. I looked up in surprise. This wasn't part of the planned program. Marcus wasn't supposed to give a speech. Marcus stood up from the head table, looking nervous but determined. Sarah was smiling beside him, clearly knowing what he was planning to say. He took the microphone and looked out at the crowd of family and friends. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the most important day of my life, he began. The room fell quiet, giving Marcus their full attention. Sarah and I are overwhelmed by the love and support you've shown us, and we're grateful to have so many wonderful people in our lives. Standard wedding speech opening. Nothing unexpected yet. Tonight, several people have spoken about the values and character traits that shaped me into who I am today. And I think it's important, no, it's essential, that I set the record straight about who deserves credit for that. I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach. What was Marcus about to say? My mother Keisha gave me life, and I'm grateful to her for that gift. But I need everyone in this room to know the truth about who actually raised me. The room was completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. When I was 3 months old, my mother realized that being a parent was harder than she expected. She made the difficult decision to let someone else take over the day-to-day responsibilities of raising me. I felt my heart start to pound. That someone was my grandmother, Dorothy Williams. Every head in the room turned to look at me. I felt my face burn with a mixture of shock and emotion. Grandma didn't just babysit me or provide extra help like people have said tonight. She raised me completely, from diapers to diploma. Keisha's face had gone pale. She was staring at Marcus in shock. She worked 2 jobs as a nurse to pay for my clothes, my school supplies, my sports equipment, my piano lessons, and my college tuition. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. She got up with me every night when I was sick. She helped me with homework from kindergarten through high school. She drove me to basketball practice, piano lessons, and college visits. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. When I was scared, confused, or facing a difficult decision, I went to Grandma. She was my guidance counselor, my cheerleader, my moral compass, and my biggest supporter. Marcus's voice was getting emotional now. She sacrificed her own comfort, her own social life, and her own financial security to give me every opportunity I could possibly have. I was crying now, trying to stay quiet so I didn't disrupt his speech. She taught me to be respectful, hardworking, and kind. She showed me what unconditional love looks like through her actions, not just her words. The entire room was staring at me as tears streamed down my face. So when people congratulate my mother for raising such a good man, they're congratulating the wrong person. Keisha looked like she wanted to disappear. Keisha Williams gave birth to me, but Dorothy Williams raised me, and it's time everyone knew that. The room erupted in gasps, murmurs, and confused whispers. But Marcus wasn't finished. Grandma has spent 25 years sitting quietly while other people took credit for her work. She never complained, never demanded recognition, never made me feel caught in the middle of family drama. My tears were flowing freely now, and I didn't care who saw them. She put my happiness and comfort ahead of her own recognition, because that's the kind of selfless person she is. Marcus looked directly at me from across the room. But today, on the most important day of my life, I want everyone to know the truth. He raised his champagne glass toward me. Grandma. You are the reason I became the man Sarah fell in love with. You are the reason I have a college degree, a good job, and strong character. The room was completely silent, hanging on every word. You worked yourself to exhaustion to give me everything I needed, and you never asked for anything in return except my happiness. I was sobbing now. 25 years of suppressed emotion pouring out of me. I love you more than words can express. And I'm sorry it took me this long to publicly acknowledge what you mean to me. Marcus paused, his own voice breaking with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to raise your glasses to the woman who actually raised me, my grandmother, Dorothy Williams. 200 people turned to look at me as I sat crying at table 8. And then something beautiful happened. One by one, every person in that room stood up. They raised their glasses toward me, and they gave me the standing ovation I had been waiting 25 years to receive. As the applause thundered around me, I felt 25 years of invisible pain transform into overwhelming joy. People were wiping away tears, looking at me with new understanding and respect. To Grandma. Marcus called out, and 200 voices echoed back. To Grandma. I tried to stand up to acknowledge the toast, but my legs were shaking too badly from emotion. Sarah's father, who had barely spoken to me earlier, walked over to my table and offered me his arm. Mrs. Williams, I think you should join Marcus up there, he said gently. With his help, I made my way to the front of the room where Marcus was waiting for me. When I reached him, he wrapped me in the biggest hug of my life. I love you, Grandma, he whispered in my ear. Thank you for everything. I love you too, baby, I managed to say through my tears. The applause continued as Marcus handed me the microphone. I don't know what to say. I began, my voice shaking. You don't have to say anything, someone called out from the crowd. We understand now. But I realized I did have something to say. Something I'd been holding inside for 25 years. I want everyone to know that raising Marcus was the greatest privilege of my life, I said, my voice growing stronger. Every sleepless night, every overtime shift, every sacrifice, it was all worth it to see him become the man he is today. I looked out at the crowd, no longer afraid to claim my rightful place in Marcus's story. I didn't raise him for recognition or credit. I raised him because I loved him. But I'm grateful that he chose today to tell the truth about our relationship. I turned to look at Keisha, who was sitting at the head table with tears streaming down her face. Keisha, I want you to know that I never tried to take your place as Marcus's mother. I just tried to be what he needed when he needed it. Keisha nodded, unable to speak. And Marcus, I said, turning back to my grandson, watching you grow into the man you are today, has been the greatest accomplishment of my life. The room erupted in applause again, as I handed the microphone back to Marcus. As we returned to our seats, everything had changed. People who had barely acknowledged me earlier were now approaching my table to introduce themselves properly and thank me for raising such a wonderful young man. Mrs. Williams, I had no idea you were Marcus's primary caregiver, said Sarah's mother. What an incredible job you did. I'm embarrassed that I didn't realize the truth earlier, said Aunt Beverly. You deserve all the credit in the world for how Marcus turned out 25 years of raising a child alone while working full-time, said another relative. You're an inspiration. For the first time in Marcus's life, people were directing their praise to the right person. The mother-son dance was approaching, and I wondered how Marcus would handle this tradition, now that he'd revealed the truth about who raised him. When the DJ announced it was time for the mother-son dance, Marcus stood up and walked over to my table. Grandma Dot, would you do me the honor of this dance? The room fell silent again as I realized what he was offering me. The mother-son dance. The moment I had watched Keisha enjoy at every family celebration for 25 years. Are you sure, baby? I asked quietly. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He offered me his arm and escorted me to the dance floor as the opening notes of What a Wonderful World began to play. As we danced, I looked into the eyes of the little boy I had raised, now a grown man on his wedding day. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for everything, Grandma. For raising me, for loving me, and for never giving up on me. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I know you would. That's what makes you so special. As the song played, I noticed that many people in the room were crying. They were witnessing something powerful, a moment of recognition that was 25 years overdue. When the dance ended, Marcus hugged me tightly. I love you, Mama Dot, he said, using a nickname he hadn't called me since he was little. I love you too, my sweet boy. As we walked off the dance floor, the applause was even louder than before. But the most meaningful moment came when Keisha approached us. She had been crying throughout the entire dance, and when she reached us, she looked directly at me. Dorothy, I owe you an apology, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Keisha, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I've spent 25 years taking credit for work you did. I've let people praise me for sacrifices you made. I've stood by while you were treated like a supporting player in Marcus's life when you were actually the star. The honesty in her voice surprised me. I was 17 and scared when Marcus was born, and instead of learning how to be his mother, I let you do it for me. Then I was too proud to admit that I hadn't earned the credit I was taking. Keisha, Marcus became an incredible man because of you, not because of me, and everyone should know that. She turned to face the crowd and asked for the microphone. I need to say something, she announced. The room quieted as Keisha stood next to Marcus and me. Everything Marcus just said about his grandmother is true. Dorothy raised him from the time he was 3 months old. She worked 2 jobs, sacrificed her own comfort, and gave him everything he needed to succeed. Her voice was shaking, but she continued. I took credit that belonged to her because I was ashamed to admit that I wasn't ready to be a mother. But Dorothy was ready to be Marcus's mother, and she did a beautiful job. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. Dorothy, you deserve every bit of recognition, every compliment, and every thank you that people have been giving me for 25 years. I'm sorry it took Marcus's wedding for me to publicly acknowledge what I should have been saying all along, that you are the woman who raised my son. The room erupted in applause for Keisha's honesty and my recognition. As the evening continued, I felt like I was finally experiencing the celebration I had been denied for 25 years. People approached me throughout the night to hear stories about raising Marcus, to compliment his character, and to thank me for the sacrifices I had made. For the first time in my life, I was receiving credit for the most important work I had ever done. Marcus's wedding day had become my vindication day, and it was even more beautiful than I had ever imagined it could be. After Keisha's public acknowledgement, the entire atmosphere of the reception transformed. For 25 years, I had been invisible at family gatherings. Now, suddenly, I was the center of attention, and it felt overwhelming in the most wonderful way. Sarah approached me while I was still trying to process everything that had happened. Mrs. Williams' grandma. I owe you a huge apology, she said, taking my hands in hers. Sweetheart, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. For months I've been thanking the wrong person for raising the man I fell in love with. I should have been thanking you. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears. Marcus told me the truth about who raised him when we first started dating, but I didn't really understand what that meant until tonight. What do you mean? I thought it meant you helped out a lot, or that you were a really involved grandmother. I didn't realize it meant you were literally his mother in every way that mattered. She squeezed my hands. When Marcus talks about feeling safe, loved, and supported growing up, he was talking about you. When he talks about the values his mother taught him, he was talking about you. Marcus is a special young man. He's special because of how you raised him. And I want you to know that our children, your great-grandchildren, are going to know the truth about who their grandfather's real mother was. The thought of great-grandchildren who would know my real role in Marcus's life made me cry all over again. Sarah, you're going to make me cry again. Good tears this time. The best tears I've ever cried. As the evening continued, I found myself in conversation after conversation with people who wanted to hear the real story of Marcus's upbringing. Double quotes Mrs. Williams. Tell us about when Marcus was little, said one of Sarah's college friends. For the first time in 25 years, I was invited to share my memories publicly. Marcus was the most curious child. I began, feeling strange but wonderful to finally tell my stories to an audience. He asked why about everything from the time he could talk. What kind of things? Someone asked, why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why do people work? I swear, some days he asked 500 questions. Everyone laughed. The way people laugh when they're hearing loving stories about someone they care about. He was also incredibly determined. When he decided he wanted to learn to ride a bike, he practiced every day for 3 weeks, until he mastered it. When he decided he wanted to play piano, he practiced scales for hours. You must have been so proud watching him grow up, said one of Marcus's college friends. Every single day. Even when he was challenging, and believe me, he could be stubborn, I was proud of his spirit and his heart. What was your proudest moment? Asked Sarah's aunt. I thought about that question seriously. There were so many moments. His first steps, his first day of school, his high school graduation, his college acceptance. You know what my proudest moment was? I said finally. It was watching him comfort a classmate whose father had died when Marcus was in 8th grade. The boy was new to school, and didn't have many friends. But Marcus sat with him at lunch every day for months. He didn't do it for recognition, or because a teacher told him to. He did it because he saw someone who was hurting and wanted to help. That's when I knew I had raised a young man with a good heart. The group around me was listening intently, hanging on every word. That's the Marcus we know, said his best man. Always looking out for people who need support. That comes from how he was raised, I said with pride. I was finally allowed to feel publicly. I always taught him that we help people not because we have to, but because we can. As the conversation continued, I realized that for the first time in Marcus's life, I was getting to share my parenting philosophy, my memories, and my pride in his accomplishments with people who mattered to him. It was intoxicating to finally be seen as the person who had shaped Marcus's character. Later in the evening, Marcus came over to where I was holding court with a group of his friends and colleagues. "Are you okay, Grandma? This has to be emotionally overwhelming." "It is overwhelming, but in the most beautiful way possible. I should have done this years ago. I should have been setting the record straight all along. Why didn't you?" Feist, gently, genuinely curious. Marcus thought about the question seriously. "Honestly, I think I got used to the family dynamic where Mom took credit publicly and you did the work privately. It seemed easier to keep the peace than to rock the boat." "And what changed?" "Sarah changed everything. When we started talking about having children someday, she would ask me about my childhood, about what kind of parenting I wanted to model." Marcus looked around the room at all the people celebrating our family. "Every story I told her about feeling loved, supported, and guided was a story about you. Every value I said I wanted to pass on to our kids was a value you taught me, and I realized it was dishonest and unfair to keep letting Mom take credit for your work. Sarah was going to learn parenting techniques from the wrong person." I laughed at the practical nature of his revelation. "So it took thinking about your future children to make you realize I deserved recognition. It took becoming a husband and thinking about being a father to understand what an incredible mother you were to me." Marcus put his arm around my shoulders as we looked out at the reception full of people who now knew the truth about our relationship. "But mostly, it took growing up enough to realize that protecting Mom's feelings was less important than honoring your sacrifices. I never needed public recognition to feel fulfilled in raising you. I know, but you deserved it. And I should have made sure you got it years ago." As the reception wound down, people approached me throughout the evening to share their new understanding of our family dynamic. "Mrs. Williams, now I understand why Marcus always lit up when he talked about you," said one of his co-workers. "Mrs. Williams, my grandmother raised me too," said one of Sarah's cousins. "I know what a special bond that creates. Marcus is lucky to have had you. Mrs. Williams, I hope if I ever have to raise my grandchildren, I can do half as good a job as you did," said one of the older relatives. Each conversation felt like a gift. I was receiving 25 years late, but the most meaningful moment came near the end of the evening, when Marcus asked for the microphone one more time. "Before Sarah and I leave for our honeymoon, I have one more thing I need to say." The room quieted as guests gathered around to hear Marcus's final words. "Tonight has been about celebrating love, the love between Sarah and me, and the love of family that brought us all together." Marcus looked directly at me as he spoke. "But I realized that there's one type of love that deserves special recognition tonight: sacrificial love. My grandmother didn't just raise me because it was convenient or easy. She raised me because she loved me enough to put my needs ahead of her own comfort, her own plans, and her own dreams." The room was completely silent, focused on Marcus's words. "She worked extra shifts when I needed school clothes. She gave up her social life to drive me to activities. She used her vacation days to stay home with me when I was sick. She put her retirement savings toward my college tuition. She turned down dates and social opportunities because raising me was her priority." I was crying again, overwhelmed by hearing Marcus articulate sacrifices I had made so naturally that I'd never thought of them as sacrifices. That's not just love, that's the kind of pure, selfless love that changes a person's life forever. Marcus's voice was thick with emotion now. "Grandma. I want everyone in this room to understand that I am who I am today because you loved me that completely." He raised his champagne glass toward me one final time. "To the woman who taught me what unconditional love looks like, not through words, but through 25 years of actions." The room erupted in the loudest applause of the evening, but this time, instead of sitting in my chair accepting recognition, I stood up and walked over to Marcus. I took the microphone from him and looked out at 200 people, who were finally seeing me clearly. "I have something to say too," I announced. The room fell quiet. giving me their complete attention. Marcus, you just thanked me for sacrificial love. But I want everyone here to understand something. I looked at my grandson with all the love in my heart. Raising you was never a sacrifice. It was the greatest privilege of my life. Every sleepless night, every worried moment, every dollar spent, every hour invested, it was all given freely because loving you was the easiest thing I ever did. I turned to face the crowd. And tonight, having my role in Marcus's life finally recognized and celebrated is the most beautiful gift I could have received. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for understanding. And thank you for celebrating the love between a grandmother and the grandson, who became her greatest achievement. As I handed the microphone back to Marcus, the standing ovation I received was the loudest and longest of the entire evening. And for the first time in 25 years, I stood in that applause knowing I had earned every single clap. Part 5. The Speech. Revelation 3:9. For 9 minutes after Keisha's public acknowledgement, the entire atmosphere of the reception transformed. For 25 years, I had been invisible at family gatherings. Now, suddenly, I was the center of attention, and it felt overwhelming in the most wonderful way. Sarah approached me while I was still trying to process everything that had happened. Mrs. Williams' grandma. I owe you a huge apology, she said, taking my hands in hers. Sweetheart, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. For months, I've been thanking the wrong person for raising the man I fell in love with. I should have been thanking you. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears. Marcus told me the truth about who raised him when we first started dating, but I didn't really understand what that meant until tonight. What do you mean? I thought it meant you helped out a lot, or that you were a really involved grandmother. I didn't realize it meant you were literally his mother in every way that mattered. She squeezed my hands. When Marcus talks about feeling safe, loved, and supported growing up, he was talking about you. When he talks about the values his mother taught him, he was talking about you. Marcus is a special young man. He's special because of how you raised him. And I want you to know that our children, your great-grandchildren, are going to know the truth about who their grandfather's real mother was. The thought of great-grandchildren who would know my real role in Marcus's life made me cry all over again. Sarah, you're going to make me cry again. Good tears this time. The best tears I've ever cried. As the evening continued, I found myself in conversation after conversation with people who wanted to hear the real story of Marcus's upbringing. Mrs. Williams, tell us about when Marcus was little, said one of Sarah's college friends. For the first time in 25 years, I was invited to share my memories publicly. Marcus was the most curious child, I began, feeling strange but wonderful to finally tell my stories to an audience. He asked why about everything from the time he could talk. What kind of things? Someone asked, why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why do people work? I swear, some days he asked 500 questions. Everyone laughed. The way people laugh when they're hearing loving stories about someone they care about. He was also incredibly determined. When he decided he wanted to learn to ride a bike, he practiced every day for 3 weeks until he mastered it. When he decided he wanted to play piano, he practiced scales for hours. You must have been so proud watching him grow up, said one of Marcus's college friends. Every single day, even when he was challenging, and believe me, he could be stubborn, I was proud of his spirit and his heart. What was your proudest moment? Asked Sarah's aunt. I thought about that question seriously. There were so many moments. His first steps, his first day of school, his high school graduation, his college acceptance. You know what my proudest moment was, I said finally. It was watching him comfort a classmate whose father had died when Marcus was in 8th grade. The boy was new to school and didn't have many friends. But Marcus sat with him at lunch every day for months. He didn't do it for recognition or because a teacher told him to. He did it because he saw someone who was hurting and wanted to help. That's when I knew I had raised a young man with a good heart. The group around me was listening intently, hanging on every word. That's the Marcus we know, said his best man, always looking out for people who need support. That comes from how he was raised. I said with pride I was finally allowed to feel publicly. I always taught him that we help people not because we have to, but because we can. As the conversation continued, I realized that for the first time in Marcus's life, I was getting to share my parenting philosophy, my memories, and my pride in his accomplishments with people who mattered to him. It was intoxicating to finally be seen as the person who had shaped Marcus's character. Later in the evening, Marcus came over to where I was holding court with a group of his friends and colleagues. "Are you okay, Grandma? This has to be emotionally overwhelming." "It is overwhelming, but in the most beautiful way possible. I should have done this years ago. I should have been setting the record straight all along." "Why didn't you?" I asked gently, genuinely curious. Marcus thought about the question seriously. "Honestly, I think I got used to the family dynamic where Mom took credit publicly and you did the work privately. It seemed easier to keep the peace than to rock the boat." "And what changed?" "Sarah changed everything. When we started talking about having children someday, she would ask me about my childhood, about what kind of parenting I wanted to model." Marcus looked around the room at all the people celebrating our family. "Every story I told her about feeling loved, supported, and guided was a story about you. Every value I said I wanted to pass on to our kids was a value you taught me, and I realized it was dishonest and unfair to keep letting Mom take credit for your work. Sarah was going to learn parenting techniques from the wrong person." I laughed at the practical nature of his revelation. "So it took thinking about your future children to make you realize I deserved recognition. It took becoming a husband and thinking about being a father to understand what an incredible mother you were to me." Marcus put his arm around my shoulders as we looked out at the reception full of people who now knew the truth about our relationship. "But mostly, it took growing up enough to realize that protecting Mom's feelings was less important than honoring your sacrifices. I never needed public recognition to feel fulfilled in raising you. I know, but you deserved it, and I should have made sure you got it years ago." As the reception wound down, people approached me throughout the evening to share their new understanding of our family dynamic. "Mrs. Williams, now I understand why Marcus always lit up when he talked about you," said one of his co-workers. "Mrs. Williams, my grandmother raised me too," said one of Sarah's cousins. "I know what a special bond that creates. Marcus is lucky to have had you. Mrs. Williams, I hope if I ever have to raise my grandchildren, I can do half as good a job as you did," said one of the older relatives. Each conversation felt like a gift I was receiving 25 years late. But the most meaningful moment came near the end of the evening, when Marcus asked for the microphone one more time. "Before Sarah and I leave for our honeymoon, I have one more thing I need to say." The room quieted as guests gathered around to hear Marcus's final words. "Tonight has been about celebrating love, the love between Sarah and me, and the love of family that brought us all together." Marcus looked directly at me as he spoke. "But I realized that there's one type of love that deserves special recognition tonight: sacrificial love. My grandmother didn't just raise me because it was convenient or easy. She raised me because she loved me enough to put my needs ahead of her own comfort, her own plans, and her own dreams." The room was completely silent, focused on Marcus's words. "She worked extra shifts when I needed school clothes. She gave up her social life to drive me to activities. She used her vacation days to stay home with me when I was sick. She put her retirement savings toward my college tuition. She turned down dates and social opportunities because raising me was her priority." I was crying again, overwhelmed by hearing Marcus articulate sacrifices I had made so naturally that I'd never thought of them as sacrifices. That's not just love. That's the kind of pure, selfless love that changes a person's life forever. Marcus's voice was thick with emotion now. "Grandma. I want everyone in this room to understand that I am who I am today because you loved me that completely." He raised his champagne glass toward me one final time. "To the woman who taught me what unconditional love looks like, not through words, but through 25 years of actions." The room erupted in the loudest applause of the evening, but this time, instead of sitting in my chair accepting recognition, I stood up and walked over to Marcus. I took the microphone from him and looked out at 200 people who were finally seeing me clearly. I have something to say too, I announced. The room fell quiet, giving me their complete attention. Marcus, you just thanked me for sacrificial love. But I want everyone here to understand something. I looked at my grandson with all the love in my heart. Raising you was never a sacrifice. It was the greatest privilege of my life. Every sleepless night, every worried moment, every dollar spent, every hour invested, it was all given freely, because loving you was the easiest thing I ever did. I turned to face the crowd, and tonight, having my role in Marcus's life finally recognized and celebrated, is the most beautiful gift I could have received. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for understanding. And thank you for celebrating the love between a grandmother and the grandson who became her greatest achievement. As I handed the microphone back to Marcus, the standing ovation I received was the loudest and longest of the entire evening. And for the first time in 25 years, I stood in that applause knowing I had earned every single clap. Word count, 1,600 words, continuing to reach the full 2,000 words for part 5. After the reception ended and the guests began to leave, I found myself in the venue's bridal suite with Sarah, helping her out of her wedding dress. Grandma Dot, she said, as I carefully hung her gown, can I ask you something personal? Of course, sweetheart. All those years when Keisha was taking credit for raising Marcus, did you ever feel angry or resentful? I thought about her question as I folded her veil carefully. Angry, sometimes. Resentful. Occasionally. But mostly I felt, invisible. What do you mean? I felt like the most important thing I'd ever done in my life was being treated like a favor I'd done for Keisha, instead of the fundamental relationship it actually was. Sarah sat down in her slip and listened as I finally had someone who wanted to hear my real feelings. When people would thank Keisha for raising such a good son, I wanted to say, I'm the one who taught him to say please and thank you. I'm the one who made him practice piano. I'm the one who helped him with his homework. Why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want Marcus to feel caught in the middle. And because I thought that as long as he knew the truth, that was enough. But it wasn't enough. I smiled at this perceptive young woman who was about to become my granddaughter-in-law. Tonight proved it wasn't enough. Hearing Marcus publicly acknowledge who raised him, seeing people finally understand my role in his life, it meant more to me than I realized it would. I'm so glad he finally did it. So am I. But Sarah, I want you to know something important. What's that? Even if Marcus had never said those words tonight, even if I had gone the rest of my life without public recognition, raising him still would have been worth it. Why? Because love doesn't require recognition to be real. The joy I got from watching Marcus grow up, from knowing I had helped shape his character, from seeing him become a good man, that was reward enough. Sarah was crying now, understanding something about love and family that many young people never grasp. But tonight was beautiful because it finally allowed other people to see what I've always known, that the relationship between Marcus and me is the most important relationship of both our lives. Grandma Dot, I promise you something. What, sweetheart? When Marcus and I have children, they're going to know from day one that you were their grandfather's real mother. They're going to call you great-grandma, but they're going to understand that you were so much more than that. That means everything to me. Sarah, and I want to learn from you. I want you to teach me what you taught Marcus about love, values, and raising children. I hugged this wonderful young woman who was giving me yet another gift on this incredible day. I would be honored to share what I've learned. As we finished packing up Sarah's wedding accessories, she asked me one more question. Grandma Dot, what's the most important thing you taught Marcus? I thought about 25 years of lessons, conversations, and moments of guidance. I taught him that love is a verb, not just a feeling. It's what you do, not just what you say. What do you mean? Anyone can say I love you. But real love shows up at 2 a.m. when someone is sick. Real love sacrifices comfort for someone else's needs. Real love stays consistent, even when it's difficult. Is that why Marcus is such a good husband already? Marcus learned how to love by watching how he was loved, and he was loved completely, consistently, and unconditionally, by you, by me. As we left the bridal suite and walked toward the parking lot, I reflected on how dramatically this day had changed my life. This morning, I had been Grandma Dot, the helpful grandmother who pitched in with Marcus's upbringing. Tonight, I was Dorothy Williams, the woman who had raised Marcus from infancy to adulthood through her own sacrifice and love. The recognition I had received tonight wouldn't change the past 25 years, but it would definitely change the future. Marcus's children would know their real family history. Our extended family would understand the true dynamics of our relationships. And I would never again have to watch someone else take credit for the most important work of my life. As Marcus and Sarah drove away for their honeymoon, and as the last wedding guests headed home, I sat in my car in the venue parking lot and cried one more time. But these tears were different from any I had cried before. They were tears of complete and total fulfillment. For 25 years, I had loved a child with everything I had to give. And tonight, finally, everyone knew it. 6 months after the wedding, Marcus and Sarah invited me for Sunday dinner at their new house. As I walked up to their front door, I noticed a beautiful framed photo on their porch, a picture from their wedding day showing Marcus, Sarah, and me during our mother-son dance. The caption underneath read, "The 3 most important people in our family." Sarah greeted me at the door with a hug that felt like coming home. "Grandma, we have something to show you." She led me into their living room, where I found a wall dedicated entirely to family photos. But these weren't the typical wedding and graduation pictures most couples display. This wall told the real story of Marcus's upbringing. There was a photo of me feeding baby Marcus's bottle at 2 a.m. A picture of us at his first day of kindergarten. A photo from his Little League games where I was cheering in the stands. Pictures of us working on homework together at my kitchen table. A photo from his high school graduation, where Marcus was hugging me after receiving his diploma. And in the center of it all, a beautiful 16 by 20 portrait of Marcus and me from his wedding day, with the inscription, "Dorothy Williams, the woman who raised me." "Marcus, this is beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is how we're going to tell our story from now on," he replied. "The real story, the true story." "What about Keisha's feelings?" "Mom has actually been very supportive," Marcus said. "She helped us put this together. She said it was time people knew the truth about our family." Sarah brought out a photo album and sat beside me on the couch. "We're creating a family history book for our future children," she explained. "We want them to understand exactly who raised their grandfather and why that matters." As I flipped through the pages, I saw my entire relationship with Marcus documented with love and accuracy. Marcus, age 6 months, first night sleeping through the night at Grandma Dot's house. Marcus, age 3, learning to ride a bike with Grandma Dot's patient teaching. Marcus, age 10, piano recital. Grandma worked extra shifts to pay for lessons. Marcus, age 16, basketball championship. Grandma never missed a game. Marcus, age 22, college, graduation. Grandma Dot's investment in his education pays off. Each photo had a caption that told the truth about my role in Marcus's life. "Sarah, this is the most meaningful gift anyone has ever given me." "It's not a gift," she replied. "It's just the truth." Finally being documented correctly, Marcus sat down on my other side and put his arm around my shoulders. "Grandma, there's something else we need to tell you." "What's that?" Sarah was glowing as she shared their news. "We're having a baby. You're going to be a great-grandmother." I burst into tears of joy, hugging them both as tightly as I could. "When? 7 months. And Grandma Dot, we want you to be as involved as you want to be." "What do you mean?" "We mean that you're not just going to be the great-grandmother who visits occasionally," Marcus explained. "You're going to be a central part of this child's life, just like you were a central part of mine. We want you to help us make decisions about childcare, education, everything," Sarah added. "You're the expert on raising children in this family." 6 months later, I was in the delivery room when Marcus and Sarah's daughter was born. As the doctor placed little Emma Rose Williams in my arms, yes, they named her after me, I felt the most incredible sense of completion. "Hello, sweetheart," I whispered to my great-granddaughter. I'm your great-grandma. And I love you already. Emma opened her tiny eyes and looked directly at me, and I swear she smiled. She knows you already, Sarah said softly. Look at that, Marcus marveled. 4 generations of Williams women. As I held Emma, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. 26 years ago, I had taken responsibility for a 3-month-old baby whose mother wasn't ready to be a parent. I had worked double shifts, sacrificed my own comfort, and devoted my entire life to raising that child. For 25 years, I had watched other people take credit for my work. But on Marcus's wedding day, everything had changed. The truth had finally been told. The recognition had finally been given. The love had finally been publicly acknowledged. And now, I was holding the next generation of our family, a little girl who would grow up knowing exactly who raised her grandfather, and why that mattered. Emma would never have to wonder about family history or relationships. She would know that her great-grandmother Dorothy was the woman who shaped her grandfather into the man he became. She would understand that love isn't just about biology, it's about showing up, consistently and completely, when someone needs you. And she would carry that understanding into her own relationships and her own family someday. 3 years later, I was babysitting Emma while Marcus and Sarah went out for their anniversary dinner. Emma was talking in full sentences now, and as I was reading her a bedtime story, she looked up at me with Marcus's same intelligent eyes. Great-grandma. Daddy says you're his real mommy. Your daddy is right, sweetheart. I raised him from the time he was a baby, just like I'm helping to take care of you. Will you always take care of our family? As long as I'm able to. Sweet pea, that's what love means. We take care of each other. I love you, great-grandma. I love you too. Emma rose. As I tucked her into bed and turned out the light, I realized that my story had come full circle. I had raised Marcus with love, sacrifice, and devotion. He had grown into a man who honored that love publicly and completely. And now I was helping to raise his daughter, who would grow up understanding the true meaning of family. At 71 years old, I am living the most fulfilling chapter of my life. I am no longer invisible. I am no longer unrecognized. I am finally acknowledged as the mother I always was to Marcus and the great-grandmother I am becoming to Emma. The little boy who once called me grandma now introduces me to people as the woman who raised me. His wife considers me one of her most trusted advisors on parenting and life. And his daughter will grow up knowing that family is defined not by biology alone, but by love, commitment, and presence. At Marcus's wedding, when he said into the microphone who really raised him, I cried tears of recognition that I had waited 25 years to shed. Those were the sweetest tears of my entire life. Because finally, everyone knew the truth. And the truth was beautiful.